unlike in other countries in the world where the tendency of deadly violence has been dropping over the past few years, Mexico is really just one of the few countries in the world where violence against the press is rising every year. Over 100 reporters have been killed over the past 15 years. CPJ has been able to link the motive of 42 killings directly with the reporter's job as a journalist. And non-lethal violence has also been on the rise. It's a vicious cycle of violence, of impunity, of lack of commitment by different levels of government to solving the problem, of law enforcement that's not doing their jobs, of journalists who feel like they have nowhere to turn to or no one to protect them. Especially because more than half of all the attacks against the press are committed by government agents, by police officers, by local politicians, etc. The Mexican government in 2012 created an institution called the Federal Mechanism for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders and Journalists. At least on paper, the mechanism was designed to protect reporters and human rights defenders from danger, provides them with certain security measures like bodyguards, like cameras at their homes, bulletproof cars and vests even, and a panic button. One of the big problems is that even though this institution was created, the Mexican government never really committed to making it work adequately. It never got enough money to function. For example, in 2014, the mechanism had 36 employees and less than 100 journalists and human rights defenders incorporated in protective measures. As of 2019, it has more than 1,000 people incorporated and still only 36 employees. And anecdotally, we know that many reporters are very worried about whether their safety measures are actually working. And they have reason to, because in the past few years, at least 5 reporters who have been incorporated in the mechanism have been killed. Especially during the past government of President Enrique Peña Nieto, there were serious problems with money. The mechanism didn't receive enough money to implement security measures on several occasions, and CPJ, together with other organizations, has been trying to push the government to improve its financing, its funding, to hire more people, to train its people better, because ultimately only the Mexican federal government has the capacity to protect journalists against organized crime or against corrupt police officers, etc. Now, recently, there was an international mission from the Safety for Journalists Coalition in Mexico, and CPJ is part of that coalition. And we had a conversation with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador during his daily morning press conference on November 6th. And we asked him directly if the president would commit to properly funding the mechanism. And we're glad to report that the president actually said that there will be no limits to the funding, which we should interpret as the mechanism will at least not run out of money, as it had on several occasions over the past few years. Another commitment by President López Obrador is that he'll stick to a report published by the UN a few months ago, in which the UN provides 104 recommendations as to how to strengthen the mechanism, and the government said that they will abide by all 104 recommendations. For example, properly funding the mechanism, training its personnel better, making sure that that the implementation of security measures is less opaque, more transparency, more accountability, and a more regional approach, because the mechanism is operating out of Mexico City and isn't always fully aware of what's going on the ground in different areas, especially the more dangerous ones. So amid a sea of bad news in Mexico, this is a very positive development, and it's something that CPJ has been working on for several years, and that's a bit of positive impact from our advocacy. So far, there's not really a roadmap towards that process, and we're going to continue to push for the Mexican government to provide clear and measurable answers to those questions. We need stronger institutions. We need a stronger commitment from the Mexican government because so far it looks like things are only going to get worse before they're going to get better.